Imagine you're deep within an ancient forest on a night so dark that even the moon struggles to pierce through the thick canopy above. The air is heavy, saturated with the scent of damp earth and pine needles, but something else lingers, a feeling, an unseen presence that watches your every step. This isn't just a story. It's an invitation to a world where the boundary between myth and reality blurs, where the creatures of legend might just be waiting for you in the shadows, ready to reveal themselves. Prepare yourself as we delve into a realm where the unknown is not just imagined. It's real. The night had started like any other, quiet, still, and seemingly uneventful. Liam was new to the outpost, a small station buried deep within a forest that the locals had always spoken of with a mix of awe and fear. This was no ordinary forest. Its trees were ancient, their gnarled roots twisted into the ground as though they were clinging to secrets buried long ago. The villagers whispered tales of strange sightings, shadowy figures that flitted between the trees, eyes that glowed with an unnatural light, and eerie howls that echoed through the night, though their source was never found. Most people dismissed these stories as nothing more than the overactive imaginations of those who lived too close to the woods. But Liam, like many newcomers, was curious. As the youngest guard at the outpost, Liam was eager to prove himself. He often volunteered for the night shifts, seeing them as a chance to explore the forest's mysteries. The elders in the village had warned him, cautioning him not to stray too far from the beaten path. But Liam had a thirst for adventure that could not be easily quenched. That night, as he began his patrol, the forest was unnervingly silent. The usual sounds of the night, the chirping of crickets, the rustling of leaves, were conspicuously absent, replaced by an oppressive silence that seemed to press in from all sides. The only sound was the crunch of leaves under his boots as he walked. The deeper he ventured into the woods, the heavier the silence became, until it felt as though the air itself was suffocating him. Suddenly, something caught his eye, a shadow that moved swiftly between the trees. It was too fast to be an animal, and too large to be a bird. Liam's heart skipped a beat, but he shook his head, convincing himself it was just his imagination. But then, the whispers began. At first, they were barely audible, like the faint rustling of leaves in the wind. But as he walked further, they grew louder, more distinct, low, guttural murmurs that seemed to come from the very ground beneath his feet. Liam stopped dead in his tracks, straining to hear. The whispers seemed to be all around him now, growing louder with each passing second. His pulse quickened and he turned, trying to locate the source, but there was nothing there. Only the dark, looming trees and the suffocating silence. His instinct screamed at him to run, but his legs felt like lead. The whispers grew even louder, filling his mind with an eerie, incomprehensible language that sent chills down his spine. Then, in a sudden burst of adrenaline-fueled panic, Liam broke free and sprinted through the woods. He didn't stop until he reached the outpost, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he burst through the door, startling his fellow guards. They laughed at his story, chalking it up to the nerves of a young man on his first night shift alone. But the fear in his eyes silenced their mockery. Something was out there, something that wasn't human, and it had made itself known to Liam. The forest was alive with something ancient, something malevolent, and it had chosen him as its target. As the days passed, Liam couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was watching him, waiting for him to return. Every night, the whispers would echo in his dreams, growing louder and more insistent until he woke in a cold sweat. The other guards began to notice the change in him, the way he would flinch at the slightest sound, the way his eyes would dart to the windows, as if expecting to see something peering back at him from the darkness. If this tale sent chills down your spine, make sure to like and share this video to spread the fear. Your support helps us bring you more spine-tingling stories, and who knows, maybe someone you know has their own story to share. Liam's harrowing experience was only the beginning of what would soon become a living nightmare for everyone at the outpost. The once calm station was now abuzz with rumors. Some guards dismissed the whispers as nothing more than the wind playing tricks, but others, especially the older ones, knew better. They had heard those whispers too, long before Liam's arrival, but had never spoken of them for fear of being ridiculed. Now, however, they could no longer ignore the signs. The atmosphere at the outpost grew tense. The guards became more cautious, sticking closer to the station and avoiding the deeper parts of the forest. Yet, despite their precautions, strange things continued to happen. Equipment malfunctioned without explanation. Footprints appeared in the mud that led nowhere, and on more than one occasion, the guards found themselves waking in the middle of the night to the sound of something scratching at the walls, only to find nothing when they checked outside. The tension reached a breaking point when, one evening, the outpost received a distress call from a nearby village. A group of hikers had gone missing in the forest, and the last anyone had heard from them, they were heading toward the same area where Liam had had his encounter. A search party was quickly formed, and despite the fear gnawing at his gut, Liam volunteered to join. He had to know if what he had experienced was real, or if it was just a figment of his imagination. The group set out at dusk, armed with flashlights, radios, and a growing sense of dread. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the whispers returned. This time they were louder, more aggressive, as if the forest itself was trying to drive them away. The trees seemed to close in around them, their twisted branches forming grotesque shapes that loomed in the shadows. The deeper they went, the more the forest seemed to change. What had once been a familiar landscape now felt like a labyrinth, each turn leading them further away from the safety of the outpost. As the night wore on, the group's fear grew palpable. The whispers had become deafening, a cacophony of voices that filled the air, drowning out their thoughts. Then they came upon a clearing, a small, eerie space surrounded by trees that were twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands. In the center of the clearing, they found the hikers. The sight that greeted them was more horrifying than anything they could have imagined. The hikers were lying on the ground, their bodies contorted in unnatural positions, their faces frozen in expressions of sheer terror. There were no signs of struggle, no visible injuries, just an overwhelming sense of dread that hung in the air like a thick fog. The search party stood in stunned silence, the whispers now a low, sinister hum that seemed to resonate from the very ground beneath their feet. It was Liam who first broke the spell, his voice barely more than a whisper as he urged the others to leave. But as they turned to go, the whispers surged, rising to a fever pitch that drowned out all other sounds. The ground beneath them began to tremble, and the trees seemed to close in, their branches swaying and twisting as though they were alive. Terrified, the group fled back to the outpost, the whispers following them all the way. By the time they burst through the door, they were pale, shaking, and too scared to speak. No one said a word about what they had seen, but the fear in their eyes told the story. The forest was not just haunted, it was alive, and it did not take kindly to intruders. Liam couldn't shake the feeling that the forest had marked him, that it had chosen him for some dark purpose. He knew he couldn't stay, not after what he had seen. But even as he packed his bags and left the outpost, the whispers continued to haunt him, echoing in his mind long after he had left the cursed place behind. What do you think happened to the hikers? Were they victims of the forest's ancient curse? Or was there something else at play? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your theories on this chilling mystery. Liam tried to leave the horrors of the forest behind, but the nightmares wouldn't let him. Every night, he was haunted by dreams of twisted trees and whispering voices, of dark figures lurking just beyond the edge of the light. The forest had followed him, clinging to him like a shadow, its whispers growing louder with each passing day. Desperate for answers, Liam began to research the history of the forest. What he found was more terrifying than anything he could have imagined. The forest was ancient, far older than the town that had been built nearby. It was said to be a place where the veil between the living and the dead was thin, where the spirits of the ancient ones could cross into the world of the living. The stories he uncovered spoke of entire villages that had vanished overnight, swallowed by the malevolent forces that resided within the forest. One legend in particular caught his attention. It spoke of a creature, neither man nor beast, that lived in the heart of the forest. This creature, known as the Keeper of the Woods, was said to be the guardian of the forest's darkest secrets. It was believed that those who ventured too far into the woods would never return, taken by the Keeper to a place where the living could not follow. Liam knew he had to go back. He had to confront whatever was lurking in those woods, to find some way to put an end to the nightmares that haunted him. Armed with the knowledge he had gathered, he returned to the forest, this time not as a guard, but as a man on a mission. He ventured deep into the heart of the forest, to the place where the whispers had first spoken to him. As he made his way through the twisted trees and tangled underbrush, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent than before. But this time, Liam didn't run. He followed the whispers, letting them guide him deeper into the forest until he reached a clearing, much like the one where the hikers had been found. In the center of the clearing stood an ancient tree, its bark blackened and twisted, its branches reaching out like claws. At the base of the tree, half buried in the earth, was a stone altar covered in strange ancient symbols. The whispers grew louder, rising to a fever pitch as Liam approached the altar. As he reached out to touch the stone, the ground beneath him began to tremble, and the whispers coalesced into a single guttural voice that seemed to speak directly into his mind. "You should not have come back!" the voice rumbled, its tone filled with anger and sorrow. The forest around him seemed to come alive, the trees swaying and groaning as if in response to the voice. But Liam was determined. He placed his hand on the altar, and as he did, the voice spoke again, this time in a language he could not understand. The ground beneath him cracked, and from the fissures, a dark, pulsating mist began to rise, swirling around him like a living thing. The mist wrapped itself around his body, seeping into his skin, filling his lungs with a cold, suffocating darkness. Liam tried to scream, but no sound came out. The darkness filled his mind, drowning out all thoughts, all memories. The last thing he heard before he lost consciousness was the voice, now gentle, almost sorrowful, whispering, "You are ours now." Liam was never seen again. The forest remains silent and brooding, its secrets hidden within the twisted branches and dark shadows. Some say that if you listen closely on a still night, you can hear the whispers calling out to those who dare to enter. The locals avoid the forest now, speaking of it only in hushed tones and warning anyone who might venture too close. But there are always those who don't listen, who are drawn to the mystery, to the thrill of facing the unknown. And for them, the forest waits. If you enjoyed this terrifying journey into the unknown, make sure to subscribe to Nightmare Narratives and hit the notification bell so you never miss another spine-chilling tale. There's always more lurking in the shadows waiting to be discovered.